My name is Marin Calloway, and at 38, I've learned that silence can cut deeper than shouting. I work nights at a small machining plant in Milwaukee, fixing engines too old for anyone else to bother with. Grease stains never quite leave my hands. I've never minded that until the night my own mother called the police on me. The blue and red lights from the squad car washed over the porch, flashing against the lake-faded paint I'd paid to have done 6 summers ago. Mom stood at the top of the steps, clutching her phone like a weapon. "She's refusing to leave my house," she said, her voice sharp enough to draw blood. "I want her gone. Her house." The officer's eyes moved between us, the woman in pearls and the daughter in steel-toed boots. He asked if I had somewhere else to go. I could have told him the truth, that I'd bought this bungalow after Dad died, that every shingle and tile was mine. But pride is a quiet thing. It doesn't argue. It just folds itself small and waits. "I'll go," I said. I walked past the lilac bushes I planted for her birthday, the ones she never watered, and down the cracked path to my car. Inside, the air smelled of oil and peppermint gum. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. The manila folder sat on the passenger seat, the word deed written in thick black marker. I traced the letters with my thumb, then scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed. When the realtor answered, I kept my voice steady. "This is Marin Calloway," I said. "List 2149 Bayview Drive. Cash offers only." The sound of my own calm surprised me. When I was 24, my hands were already older than my face. The factory floor at Kinnick Machinery never slept, just shifted from day to night. Metal to metal. Noise to noise. I worked second shift because it paid an extra $1 an hour, and if I volunteered for weekends, they threw in time and a half. That was the only math I trusted back then, hours traded for a dream big enough for 2 people. Dad died the spring I turned 26. A heart attack while tightening bolts on a job he wasn't supposed to be doing anymore. Mom barely spoke at the funeral. I think silence was her way of punishing the world for leaving her behind. That summer, I bought the little bungalow on Bayview Drive. It wasn't much peeling paint, warped floors, a lake breeze that slipped through every crack, but it was ours. Or so I thought. I used the death benefit and 15 years of savings. Signed the deed in my name for estate reasons. Mom never cared about paperwork anyway. "As long as you're close," she said, "that's all that matters." For a while, it did feel like home. She planted roses out front. I fixed the roof and painted the porch rail. But stories have a way of shifting when they're told often enough. By the second year, she'd started calling it my house. She said it in front of neighbors, friends from church, even the mailman. At first, I laughed it off, just Mom being proud. But then came phrases like my mortgage and my savings. The words slid into conversations like pebbles in a shoe small, constant irritations that made walking together harder. I never corrected her. I just kept working, hoarding the pay stubs and overtime slips in an old cookie tin under my bed. Proof, I told myself, that I wasn't imagining things. Proof that devotion leaves a paper trail. Sometimes, after long shifts, I'd sit on the porch steps and watch her curtains glow with television light. She looked so peaceful in that window, wrapped in the comfort I'd built. Love, in our house, was measured in exhaustion, and I was always rich in that. The layoff came 3 weeks before Christmas, wrapped in the kind of apology that sounds rehearsed. They'd restructured operations. Translation, my job was gone, my health insurance too. I spent a month applying for anything that paid more than minimum wage and came home one night with a twisted ankle from a warehouse shift that wasn't even mine to cover. The doctor said it would heal, but my pride didn't. Mom's voice on the phone was clipped but polite. "You can stay here until you get back on your feet," she said, temporarily. The basement had a concrete floor and one small window that faced the neighbor's fence. She gave me a folding cot and an old lamp that buzzed when I turned it on. The first night. I could hear her footsteps upstairs, steady as a clock, and realized I'd traded one kind of noise for another. She set rules before I even unpacked: no guests, no using the main bathroom, no parking in the driveway. I just need some privacy, she said, like I was an unexpected tenant instead of her daughter. I nodded. I didn't have the energy to argue. Her new church friends dropped by, often women with manicured hands and careful smiles. I'd hear their voices through the vent, soft with pity. "You're so strong." Ellen. Not everyone could handle a troubled daughter. Mom never corrected them. Sometimes she'd sigh dramatically, like a martyr. At night, when the house went still, I fixed broken toasters or microwaves for neighbors who slipped a few bills into my palm. The smell of solder filled the air, covering the damp. I told myself it was temporary, a bridge, not a basement, but each rule, each small humiliation, added a new layer of distance between us. I stopped leaving my shoes by the door. I started whispering even when I was alone. And for the first time, I wondered if love could shrink a person until she barely took up space at all. Friday nights in Bayview always smelled like lake air and wine. Mom's house glowed warm through the basement window, soft lamps, piano music, voices lilting with practiced laughter. I'd just come back from the corner store, balancing a paper bag of groceries she'd asked for crackers, grapes, and a bottle of Pinot she couldn't pronounce but liked for the label. The doorbell chimed as I reached the kitchen. 4 women stood in the hallway, dressed in soft sweaters and pearls, the kind of elegance that made my work boots feel heavier. Their perfume carried downstairs long before they did. "Oh, there she is," one of them said brightly as I set the bag on the counter. "Is that your renter?" "Ellen." The question hung in the air like dust in sunlight. Mom's smile tightened before she laughed a small, practiced sound. "Something like that," she said. Laughter followed, quick and nervous, like glassware clinking too hard. I didn't look at her. I just kept unloading the groceries, stacking each item neatly, as if order could replace oxygen. "You girls get started," Mom said. "I'll be right there." By the time she turned to me, her tone had shifted, sugary but sharp. "Next time, just leave things by the door. Okay, it's awkward when people are here." I nodded, though the word awkward landed heavier than it should have. When I turned toward the basement stairs, one of the women whispered, "She looks just like you." And the room fell silent. Downstairs, the hum of the old lamp felt louder than usual. I sat on the cot, staring at the cement wall. My hands still smelled like grapes and dust. The cookie tin was under the bed. Its lid rusted along the edge. I pulled it out and opened it. The smell of old paper filling the room, pay stubs, overtime slips, transfer receipts, proof of everything I'd built. Proof of everything she'd claimed. "Something like that," I muttered, folding the lid shut. The sound of laughter drifted down through the vent again, but it no longer reached me. That night, a quiet decision began to take shape, slow, steady, and sharper than words. The following Monday, Milwaukee's sky hung low and gray, the kind that pressed on your chest and made you walk faster just to keep from thinking. I caught the number 14 bus to the south side, a folder tucked under my arm. The cookie tin's contents now lived inside it, sorted, labeled, everything in order. Years of my life reduced to neat rectangles of proof. Ruth Delgado's office sat above a bakery that smelled like sugar and yeast. She'd gone to high school with me, a sharp-eyed girl who'd traded welding gloves for law books. When she saw me at the door, she smiled, then looked closer. "You look like someone who's done all the crying she's going to do," she said softly. "I need you to check something," I told her. "Property records, 2149 Bayview Drive." We sat across from each other at her small desk. The hum of her computer filled the silence as she typed. I could see the screen reflected in her glasses. "County of Milwaukee deed history." "Still in your name," she said after a moment. "No co-owner, no transfer, no lien." I exhaled slowly, the kind of breath that comes after months of holding still. "So it's mine. Legally." "Yes." Ruth leaned back. "Emotionally, that's another story. She clicked again, scanning recent market updates. You bought it for what, around 180,000. Current market says 340. Maybe more if you fix the porch rail. Her tone was matter of fact, but her eyes searched mine. Marin, you can evict her, but she's still your mother. I met her gaze. She's been acting like my landlord for years. Ruth didn't argue. She just nodded, pulled a legal pad from her drawer, and started writing. If you're serious, we'll need a 30-day notice. I can hold it until you confirm a buyer. I watched her neat handwriting fill the page dates. Clauses, the language of boundaries written in careful ink. When she slid the draft across the desk, my hands hesitated before touching it. The paper felt heavier than its weight. Somewhere between those printed lines was every sleepless night, every swallowed word, every time I'd mistaken obedience for love. Outside, the air smelled of fresh bread and exhaust. I folded the notice into my coat pocket and started walking, the edges of the paper pressing against my ribs like a heartbeat I finally recognized as my own. The listing went live on a Thursday morning. By Friday, Ruth called to say there was already interest, cash offers, fast closings, buyers who didn't need inspections. I expected strangers. What I didn't expect was Lorraine Pierce. Ruth mentioned her name like it was nothing. She's a retired nurse, lives 2 blocks over, used to attend your mother's church. Said she's admired the house for years. I almost laughed. Admired was one word for it. I remembered Lorraine's voice from countless afternoons when she'd stop by the porch. Compliment Mom's roses, then let the sweetness curdle. Such a charming little place. Must take a lot of upkeep for someone your age. Mom would beam, pretending not to hear the sting. When Ruth said Lorraine was offering full cash and a 10-day close, my chest tightened. It felt too neat, too pointed, like the universe had a sense of humor I didn't trust. Do you want to meet her? Ruth asked. I did. Maybe to be sure, maybe to see what justice looked like when it wore pearls. Lorraine arrived early, crisp blazer, neat hair, the smell of lilac perfume. She walked through the house like someone touring a memory she'd been waiting to own. You've kept it up beautifully, she said. I always told Ellen this house deserved a little respect. Her tone made me wonder if she knew the truth already. Maybe she did. Maybe the whole neighborhood had been waiting for this moment. When she pulled a certified check from her folder, Ruth's earlier words echoed in my head. Mercy doesn't mean surrender. I signed the paper slowly, my pen steady, even as something inside me wavered. Lorraine smiled, satisfied, but not cruel. I couldn't tell whether it was kindness or victory in her eyes, and maybe it didn't matter. Outside, the air felt different, lighter, but not gentle. The ink was still wet when I realized what I'd done. I hadn't just sold a house. I'd taken back my silence. The night I packed my last box, laughter drifted through the vents again. The sound was different this time, brighter, higher, full of relief. Mom's voice carried over the clinking of plates and glasses. I finally got my basement back, she announced, as if reclaiming lost property. The guests cheered softly, the way people do when they don't quite understand what they're applauding. I sat on the edge of the cot for a long moment before folding it flat. The basement looked the way it had the day I arrived, bare concrete, a single lamp, the smell of detergent from the washer. I took nothing she'd notice missing. My boxes fit neatly in the trunk of the car, beside the folder marked Deed and Ruth's neat stack of documents. When I closed the car door, her laughter still floated down through the night air, muffled but sure of itself. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to correct her. Let her have the victory parade. The truth would walk in on its own tomorrow morning. I drove to my new apartment on Kinnickinnick Avenue, the kind of place that smelled like paint and freedom. I didn't sleep much, only watched the ceiling fan turning shadows across the walls until daylight crept in. At 9 sharp, Ruth texted courier confirmed delivery. I pictured it perfectly, Mom in her robe. The house quiet except for the kettle whistling, the doorbell, the polite smile to the man holding 2 envelopes. One was crisp white, stamped sale confirmation. The other, a soft beige, folded in triplicate, notice to vacate 30 days. I imagined her opening the first, confusion dawning as she reached the second. A pause. Then the sound I'd known my whole life, the crash of porcelain on tile. The silence that followed would be the first honest sound inside that house in years. A week after the sale closed, my phone buzzed with a notification from the Milwaukee Sentinel. The headline sat there in bold letters, "Impossible to ignore Factory Mechanic Funds Program for Women in Skilled Trades." The article used a photo Ruth had taken me in my work jacket, grease under my nails, standing beside a stack of donated toolboxes. They wrote about the Blue Collar Futures Scholarship, how it would give women like me a chance to train without drowning in debt. They mentioned the donation amount, the years of factory work, and a brief line about a home recently sold to finance the fund. They didn't name my mother. They didn't need to. By Sunday, the whispers had found their way back to Bayview Drive. I heard from Ruth that Mom's friends at church were so proud of her daughter. They passed around the article between hymns, telling each other what an inspiration I was. I pictured their hands smoothing the paper, voices soft with envy instead of pity. Mom didn't go to service that week or the next. Her car stayed parked in the driveway, curtains drawn. Ruth said she'd probably heard everything already, that the house she'd claimed as hers had paid for something bigger than either of us. I should have felt victorious. Part of me did. But beneath the calm was something slower, heavier, a grief that had no name. I hadn't meant to humiliate her. I'd only wanted to stop disappearing. That evening, I visited the scholarship's website and read the first application, a 20-year-old welding student from Racine, raised by a single mom who cleaned offices at night. Her essay ended with a line that caught in my throat. "I just want my mother to rest one day." I closed my laptop and sat in the quiet. Triumph and sorrow shared the same heartbeat. It was late afternoon when I heard the knock 3 sharp raps. Impatient, familiar. I opened the door to find Mom standing there in her winter coat, hair pulled back too tight, eyes bright with something between fury and panic. "I'm homeless," she said before I could speak. Her voice was sharp enough to slice the air. Behind her, Lake Michigan shimmered through the buildings, calm and blue, a sky pretending nothing was wrong. "No," I said quietly. "You're between places. There's a difference." She pushed past me, scanning the small apartment. Her gaze lingered on the potted mint by the window, the second-hand table, the stack of tool manuals by the couch. "So, this is where you ran off to," she said, "while I'm packing boxes in the house you stole from me." I took a deep breath. "I didn't steal anything. Mom, I just stopped giving away what was already mine." She turned toward me, hands trembling. "You sold it to Lorraine Pierce, of all people. She made the best offer." I said, "Cash, quit closing." It wasn't about her. It was about ending something that was killing us both. For a long moment, she said nothing. The only sound was the clock ticking above the stove. Then she sank into a chair, the anger in her shoulders dissolving into exhaustion. I went to the cabinet and brought out a folder, the same one I'd carried through every storm of our lives' deeds, bank slips, 30 years of proof. I placed it in front of her. "This wasn't revenge," I said. "It was a boundary." Her fingers brushed the papers but didn't open them. Her voice broke on the next words. "You could have told me." "I did," I said softly. "You just called it disrespect when I finally said no." She covered her face, shoulders shaking, not with sobs exactly, but with the effort of holding them back. I knelt beside her, the way you would for someone bleeding from a wound you can't quite see. "I'll help with storage," I said, "and your moving costs, but the rest, you'll need to do yourself." When she stood to leave, her eyes were red but dry. Pride still lived there, but shame had finally moved in beside it. The snow had melted into slush by the time Mom found a place of her own, a small duplex near South Milwaukee with a yard big enough for her roses. Ruth told me she'd signed the lease herself. No help. No hesitation. A week later, she called. "I'm settling in," she said. "The neighbors are quiet." Her voice sounded careful, but softer than I remembered. We didn't say much else. The silence between us wasn't sharp anymore, just empty space that might one day hold something better. Most mornings now, I start my day on the balcony. The air smells of wet concrete and mint. The first plant I bought for this apartment. Basil grows beside it, reaching toward the weak spring sun. A small radio hums soft jazz, the kind that fills the corners without asking for attention. There's a letter on the table, folded and creased from how many times I've read it. The first scholarship recipient, her name is Tanya Ruiz, 21, apprentice electrician. She wrote in neat, slanted handwriting, "When I got your scholarship, my mom said she finally felt like all her years cleaning offices meant something. Thank you for believing in people like us." I run my thumb over the ink until it smudges a little. Across the street, someone's hanging laundry. The breeze off the lake smells like metal and salt. For a long time, I thought peace would come with noise, a door slammed shut, a shouted truth. But it sounds like this instead: the scrape of a mug, a radio humming, mint leaves brushing against the railing. I didn't throw her out. I just walked into my own life. The wind shifts, carrying lake air through the open door. Steam rises from my coffee, and the quiet finally feels like home.